So with that being said, let's bring up the slide right here that shows the three very experienced leaders that we've selected for this first conversation. We've got John Stoutinger, Corporate Strategy Executive from Ally, Dominic Henriquez, Partner at Risk Advisory Services at RSM, and Jonathan Hartzell, Digital Strategy and Innovation Leader at Wells Fargo. As we bring those folks onto the screen, let me lay out for you what it is we're going to be discussing today. We mentioned the three disciplines and topics a little earlier that we're going to drill into one at a time. And each of the startups that you are going to see right after this panel discussion is going to be aligned to one of those three. So we're going to go high-level key opinion leadership, and then we're going to move into specific innovators around the globe and what these startups are doing. And we're going to really focus in those disciplines today with a very simple premise and question. How has quarantine impacted these three disciplines? And what is the new normal post-COVID going to be? And I think as we drill into this, it'll be interesting because we're going to hear high-level views as well as specific examples. And many of your companies are reopening as we speak this weekend or planning for it in a month from now. And some of the companies you're going to hear from have been open and had to figure out how to operate in this new normal. So this will be information sharing that I believe everyone is going to be able to benefit from. So with that being said, let's remove the slide. Let's jump right into the panel. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. I'm going to start the first question and toss it over to Jonathan Hartzell, that handsome gentleman in the top left. The topic, back office, HR, but particularly digital onboarding, everything that's there in that space. Jonathan, start us off at a high level, macro level. You're an expert and spend a lot of time in digital transformation, all of that stuff. Just give us the high level positioning and view of your perspective on what's changing, what's the same as before and now more important in the space of back office HR and onboarding.
Great, thanks, Sark. I think the thing many of us have probably seen at this point is the meme around what is truly accelerating your digital transformation being COVID. And I think what makes that funny is that it's largely true. I think COVID has exposed across a variety of industries, e-commerce, financial services, and other places, the difference between digitizing the front end and true end-to-end digital transformation. And so in many places and for many years, companies have rolled out these digital front ends that may enable you to start an application online, but then the customer or the back office often has to have a human interaction there, right? And so, an operations shop is required to complete the application, or we're forcing our customers to come in and sign a piece of paper to finish that application. And I think COVID has made it clear, abundantly clear, that that is no longer acceptable. To a large extent, it may not even be possible, right? That our customers can come visit us and give us a wet signature, or that we have the scalability of back operations to handle the e-commerce spike that we're seeing. So I think one thing that we're learning from this crisis and that it has exposed is kind of this difference between front-end digitization versus true end-to-end digital transformation. And I think we'll see as we make it from the immediate response to the crisis through the recovery and into rethinking your business models and your operations, companies will have to take a hard look at where did they have those places that still required manual or physical interaction, and how can they move that to complete digital. So I think we'll see a lot of that going forward.
Let me follow back up with you on that real quick. One, we're already getting feedback, and one on your opening remarks says, anyone who drops a meme reference is a true hero. So kudos to you on that, my friend, as a start. I think your perspective is spot on. Those of us nerds in this community have been saying it forever. You can't fake around the front end of it a true user experience, and it's just a client experience on the top. As you're thinking about all of the people outside of just banking, who banking has been in the throes of this for the last 2 months, because aside from having to figure out how to be digital in this quarantine world, you've also had to figure out how to scale up and be able to deploy PPP and all of that stuff. what is your one takeaway or lesson for everyone else, maybe who's contemplating opening their businesses across Charlotte or the nation this coming weekend as like a practical thing? Because clearly you don't do that in the immediate term, but you do have to figure it out in that midterm if you're going to survive. Like what's a practical lesson learned that from your seat that you've seen help someone figure out how to do that, how to not just paint the outside of the house?
Well, I think as we think about opening up, the most important thing is the safety of our customers and the safety of our team members, right? So that must be your first and foremost safety. I know there's a lot of economic impacts, but the reality is it's not going to be the same. You cannot continue to operate in the way. And so whether we were talking about digital and now we're talking about physical spaces in Charlotte and the country trying to open up, there is going to have to be change, and that change is going to be, unfortunately, last longer than many of us want it to. And so, I think we'll see us, I would encourage people to use their imagination and be creative. Look around into other industries and start to find things that you may have seen deployed elsewhere, right? So as we think about, someone coming to your retail location, right? One of the things that we've done before the crisis, right? When many of us went out to eat, you put your name on a queue and they texted you when your seat was ready, right? At a restaurant. Well, that might be something we need to deploy in a lot of other places too, right? Like it's now your turn to come into the Apple store. It's now your turn to come into J. Crew or wherever it is you're going. So I think you'll see things that were used in certain industries that you can pick up and perhaps deploy in your area.
Well said. Absolutely well said. And a perfect transition for me to jump over to John Stoutinger with Ally. John, tell us, take that high level guidance just thrown out there. And maybe for the audience that is in banking or in fintech or in a completely different industry who can learn from others, let's go really into that HR, that onboarding specific challenge. Many companies of scale and size were thrown a curveball with onboarding right when this happened 2 months ago, where no matter how digital they thought it was, there were physical filter touch points that could not be just overlooked. So you guys at Ally have some specific experience in navigating through that. Tell us a little bit about that and what others can learn from your experience there.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Doug. So I'll start at a pretty high level because obviously kind of going into this on the HR front, the way we work obviously changed pretty rapidly. So, I mean, the first thing Ally had to do was really adapt to that, right? Like, so we had to get our entire workforce, 8,000 plus folks across the country to go from coming into the office every day to working remotely. And so in a very quick time frame, less than 48 hours, the team was really able to move 99% of the workforce to be completely remote. And that's not as easy as it sounds. Like, okay, take your laptop and go home. Like I think like 20% of our workforce didn't even have laptops. So they had to actually create the processes to get employees laptops, get them authenticated through VPN, expand VPN capabilities just so that they can actually function in their roles remotely. So first and foremost, Herculean efforts, and not only at Ally, I'm sure across the board with many companies in Charlotte to just enable their workforce to work from home. And then specifically around onboarding, obviously, I mean, the HR and hiring process typically is one that is very kind of in-person, high touch experience where now, obviously, we've had to move to 100% digital. So interviews are digital. Getting onboarding and getting customers their laptops and getting them set up 100% digital concierge type experience to make sure that they're kind of getting onboarded and feeling comfortable and feeling part of the team. And then even more specifically, I know I kind of touched on it a little earlier in her intro around what CFH is doing in Charlotte around the WIN program. So this obviously this pandemic kind of happened right in the middle of this year's kind of WIN cohort. So
and just for people, if you don't mind if I interrupt,
sure.
if you haven't heard of that, if you're tuning in from around the country and never heard of it, WIN is a program we developed called the Workforce Investment Network. It's designed to be an upward mobility program that takes folks with high aptitude, but maybe have never had the social opportunity to go to a four-year college, and we teach them how to code, and our banks, including those you see here represented today and many more, end up giving them the jobs they need after that intensive 6-month cohort of training that they're paid to do, and start not a job, but a career in technology and banking.
Yep, appreciate that, Tark. And then obviously, again, that's a very hands-on, in-depth training experience, and Tark and Pasha and team were really able to, without missing a beat, move that to a virtual experience, which is obviously going to help us in the next step. So Ally is a huge fan of this program and a sponsor of the program. So we are taking associates from that program, and we'll be onboarding them in the coming months as they finish up their training. But the work kind of Pasha and Tark have done to kind of get them into a digital training regimen is going to lead directly into kind of what they're going to experience when onboarding into Ally, because again, it's going to be a 100% digital experience. We've augmented many processes to make sure that their kind of orientation days will be digital, that they'll have frequent touch points with their new leadership, both through Zoom, through phone calls, through whatever kind of manner works best for them, to just ensure that we can integrate them into the workforce. But again, they're coming into kind of high touch technology, agile teams, which historically kind of sit in a kind of a pod together. And now they're really going to have to adapt to this new virtual work style. So again, very excited about the program. Again, we still have, I'm sure, a lot to learn in how this will work in a fully digital manner. But again, we're committed. I know Tarek and team are committed to making sure that the virtual aspect of this goes off without a hitch. So very, very excited to see that come to fruition in the coming months.
Quick follow-up question for you before we move on from here. What would you say to everyone watching that really has to figure out how to solve some of these things in their own walls with digital onboarding? What's the biggest lesson learned there in that you'd relay? We were forced to figure this out over the last 2 months. Is it that, like you train them in your custom corporate systems and protocols and practices, there's also an importance of training them how to interact remotely? What would you relay to everyone that maybe needs a takeaway who's facing this challenge right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the way we work is almost as important as what we're working on at this point, because for every team, for every type of role in an organization, kind of the size as ours and many others here represented on the phone, everyone works differently. So I think meeting people kind of where they're at and their preferred method, and really staying in tune with how they're doing with that, constantly soliciting feedback. If you have a broader organization like ours, we've instituted like weekly surveys just to have ways for the associates to really be able to provide that feedback on how things are going, what's working, what's not working, and so that we can continue to adapt and adjust to the new environment. So again, I would say definitely be flexible, be open-minded, ask for feedback, and then be able to, again, just adapt and meet your associates kind of where they're at in their preferred work style. I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway. And then the other one, just on overall virtual, is I think scalability. Like, I think everyone going into this probably had some level of people working at home, but having all of your people work at home versus a handful is a massive difference from an infrastructure perspective. So definitely pay attention to that as you kind of think about how you kind of get back to normal.
John, you are a gentleman and a scholar. Thank you, sir. Let's move over to Dominic. Dominic, you've heard these guys in their various banks across the street from each other. You sit over there at RSM. What are you seeing in the consulting space related to all of these critical topics, back office, HR, onboarding, as we've seen it, but as the cross-section of innovation is concerned and the requirements of this COVID time that we're in?
Yeah, thanks, Tark. From a consulting standpoint, we're definitely seeing a rapid increase in transformation and innovation, especially due to COVID-19, as companies are almost forced to think and work in a different way than they have before. Whereas, digital innovation was almost a nice to have before, maybe a slower journey where people could take their time and really understand the needs of customers and the business and the objectives of the business. It's now looking, more like it's mandatory in order to continue moving forward and doing business. Especially in certain areas like HR, back office, and onboarding. Unfortunately, with this increase in digital transformation, we're seeing a huge increase in risks to these organizations too, especially around areas like cybersecurity and even privacy. So the more innovation that's going through, obviously that's adding risk to organizations also. And I know my peers on this call are very strong in that security standpoint right there in their journeys too. And I think that's probably one of the most critical things, at least from my perspective, as you go down this journey, is ensuring that those risks are mitigated, from the start of any digital project or digital innovation.
That's a great transition point into our second topic area that we're going to see startups pitch from right after this conversation. And we know it's challenging. That is your area of expertise, that risk, compliance, and cybersecurity. What are some of those risks and best practices potentially you're seeing that you might be able to share with an entire community spanning multiple industry verticals right here that now has exposure to cybersecurity at levels they did not before 2 months ago?
Yep, definitely. And I'll keep this fairly high level because I probably could talk for hours and hours about cybersecurity and risks and mitigation of that, but I'll keep it pretty broad for this conversation. But as I was saying, the current environment and what will become kind of the new normal as we continue down the path, we're going to continue to see an increase in digital innovation and changes in how we do business, including, increased use of robots, the Internet of Things, predictive analytics, machine learning, cloud, AI. With any of these transformation projects, there's obviously potential risks associated. And, I think about a step back, you think about like a large data analytics project, or as we discussed previously, digital onboarding and HR functions where there's a significant amount of data that's collected, stored, it's utilized in a number of different ways. These innovations are causing more data to flow in different ways. And I think Jonathan, mentioned it before where, it's coming inside and outside of the organization. In some cases, it's going from physical to digital, back to physical. And you're seeing this continuous loop happening around this data. Protecting that data at risk and in transit, as well as enabling like investigation in the events of fraud or security breaches is a huge challenge. And I think that it'll continue to be an increase in that challenge in a post, COVID environment as we get back. So as we see this rapid adoption of digital innovation, creating significant opportunities for companies of all sizes, it's also creating significant risks too. I think as we mentioned before, two of those prominent risks are cybersecurity and privacy. A CISO at a large bank here in Charlotte told me many years ago that he's not worried about the attacks that are happening today or tomorrow. He's worried about the attacks that are going to happen 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months from now that hasn't been seen before, exploiting weaknesses that are not yet known. And that kind of sums it up. It's about being proactive and not reactive as we get into, digital innovation. I think that same mentality applies today even more so, when we use innovation and technology in the recovery of businesses here in Charlotte as we go forward. So, no reason to halt digital transformation, which most of us couldn't do if we tried to at this time, but it just means we manage those risks to maximize the most positive transformation that we have. I think one of the best practices that I've seen over the years is really making security consulting like an integral part of every digital project, kind of enabling the success of that project at the very beginning while avoiding unnecessary risk. When I say security consulting, not hire RSM to come in there, I really mean, it's embedding your information security group in all aspects of digital transformation projects from that very start. Continuing on best practices, companies need to ensure they're protecting the digital environment from unauthorized access usage from both internal and external standpoint. I've read so many articles around, when we think cybersecurity breaches, we typically think hackers, but more breaches are occurring from internal rather than external sources. And especially thinking about the work from home and shelter in place, the amounts of data that people are processing through, online and over the internet, it's just intense.
The calls coming from inside the house is what you're telling us?
Not calls so much, but
it was a terrible movie joke. I think your point though is very valid and one that everyone should take away there, which is the way to do this properly as you're restructuring, whether it's your HR and onboarding processes, whether it's your, what we're going to transition to in 1 second here, how you interact with customers, how you've gone digital, you have to be secure by design. You have to think of cybersecurity as you're designing that. You can't build what you need to become a transition from physical to a digital world and then think I'm going to circle back the week after and secure that all up. It just does not work that way. So it's an amazing point. I want to spend our last 5 minutes on the other topic, but before I do, I have to just jump over lightning round to both of you and say, as it relates to cybersecurity, as it relates to this place, what's your lightning round kind of gut reaction from the banking perspective? Jonathan, let's start with you.
Well, it's unfortunate when you have these type of crises that, you know, you see both heroics, but you also see kind of the downside of society, right? And as Dominic kind of highlighted, you know, you're seeing a rise in scams, you're seeing a rise in fraud, and the fraudsters are out there taking advantage of every new government stimulus program that comes out, or different ways that they can you know, create new attacks. And you know, so for all of us to remain vigilant and do the things we can, you know, just to quickly build on Dominic's point right earlier, which is, as we think about cybersecurity, I think largely we've used the physical interaction as a crutch, right? So anytime something got hard or there was increased risk, we would say, well, you know, let's have them talk to another human. And if that's not possible in this new environment, we really do have to lean in on the innovation and get better at using the data sources that we have, or new data sources, or biometrics, or other interventions other than just saying, let's put them in front of a person.
John?
Yeah, just real quick, I think, again, we are seeing all of the same things here at Ally. And one thing I would just simply call out would be, again, around the scams. Like, a lot of times, like, we think they're just targeting kind of more kind of end customers and trying to, again, whether it's steal card numbers or whatever, but we definitely see in times like this an uptick of phishing scams where, again, the phishing scams have definitely evolved from the Nigerian prince trying to get you to send him money to very sophisticated.
I still get those emails now. Are people still falling for that? I don't understand. Continue. Sorry.
Probably, hopefully not, but they've definitely evolved, and it is getting very difficult to tell kind of real and fake emails now. So again, constantly training employees and making sure that they're being kind of tested and taught to kind of make sure that they're not clicking on anything they're not supposed to click on, is obviously a big focus for us. Is again, there's a lot at risk there.
So we've got time for one question, and that's because the mayor of Charlotte droned on for much longer in the beginning than we expected her to. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm going to weave two questions together as one. What are you guys doing kind of, and what are you seeing that your companies are going to be doing as we evolve post-COVID differently? And I'm going to ask that in the frame of our final question as well, if you have the ability to weave that in, which is our final topic, which is customer interactions and that front office. We're going to see startups in that space too. Jonathan, I'm going to start again with you on this last round and just say, you know, what's changed and what do you see changing, and what can others that are opening, that many, whether you're a bank or whatever, that may be opening this weekend, that you have a head start on right now over the last 2 months? What are the things they need to anticipate, and how is it going to change for good for you guys?
Well, I think we're still very early in this crisis, right? So, if you look at the surveys, customers are still very concerned about their health as well as their financial situation, and we need to be sensitive to that, and we need to respond to that. There will be time where we move through the recovery and where we look at our business models and talk about reinvention and how we need to change. It is interesting, and one thing I might kind of put out there for people to think about is the good thing is that customers are trying a lot of new things, right? So we're seeing the rapid increase in e-commerce. We're seeing rapid increase in online grocery shopping or using Grubhub. For us at the bank, we've had a significant increase in customers depositing checks on their phone using mobile remote deposit capture capabilities. This is something we have had for years, and we have encouraged customers to use for years. but a large cohort had their patterns of going and depositing those checks at a branch or an ATM. Now that they've tried it, we see the feedback that they absolutely love it, right? So this is an area where I don't think customers are going back to taking that paper check to the branch or the ATM, right? I think that habit will stick. So within your industry, wherever you're operating, ask yourself, what are the things that customers have now learned how to do? They've learned how to do a video workout at home. They've learned how to order from Grubhub. Which of those are they going to like so much that they don't go back? And which of those are they going to say, well, actually, I really like going to the gym because of that human interaction. And I like that workout instructor who challenged me in person. So I'm going to go back. So that's one way I like to think about it is we're all learning new skills. We're learning how to operate in new ways. Which of those things will stay and which of those will go? And I think that's a good way to think about it.
Man, that is some great advice that I think applies to anyone out there opened, about to reopen, planning for it, trying to pivot. Definitely. John, let's go to you next. You have more than 2 months head start. You're a digital bank. What do you think about that same question?
Yep, no, I agree. We've been at this for a while. We've been trying to digitize pretty much every customer transaction in the banking front to facilitate kind of how we go to market here at Ally. So our focus over the past couple of months has been less around trying to, again, further digitize those interactions, because I think we've already made a ton of headway there, but more about kind of meeting customers kind of where they're at, making their lives easier. We've implemented programs around kind of forbearance just to make sure that, again, customers, again, didn't have issues paying bills over this tough time. We zeroed out their overdrawn accounts just to make sure they got the full benefit of stimulus packages that have been given for in the auto sector. Again, we've really kind of helped facilitate for dealers for them to do transactions again more digitally. Most dealers were closed over the past couple of months, but it's amazing that, again, they've found a way. Like they're out kind of hunting customers and bringing cars to customers, and again, we're doing our part to kind of facilitate those transactions. So again, it's more about, I think, going and continuing to kind of meet customers kind of where they're at to help them facilitate their lives and their businesses. Again, I think that's something we'll continue to approach even beyond the new norm here. And then just in terms of kind of advice to offer up, I think kind of similar to Jonathan, like my thoughts around like where you focus innovation around kind of what Jonathan was mentioning, like what's going to stick versus what's not. That's where my advice would be focusing on those kind of behavioral implications that are definitely going to stick. Again, the remote work that we've talked about. I mean, this last couple of months has proven that you can actually operate many large companies without having office space. That's going to have very real implications in the future. And again, I don't want to kind of overstate that to say like office space is going away. Obviously, I think there'll be some balance that will be struck there where it may not be as dense as it once was. And again, I think the in-person experience is definitely going to be a part of what's in the future. But again, I don't think we'll go back to having 1% of our workforce work remotely. I think it's going to be something much more significant than that. The accelerated digital adoption, like I think that will continue in many facets outside of banking. It's something where, again, we've seen ramp up over the past couple of months. That is only going to continue. And then one other one that kind of not related to banking, but more about like you think of it, the city of Charlotte, like and how we think about density. I mean, I think people's decisions on where they live and work are probably going to be implicated here. I mean, if you think about like New York, where you have to think about getting on a crowded subway every day versus maybe hopping in your car by yourself here in Charlotte, I mean, that has very real implications, I think, on how people and where people will decide to live and work in the future. So those are just a few of the things I think will kind of live beyond this, but I think that's, again, the right way to focus is think about the long-term behavioral kind of changes that are going to occur here versus kind of some of the short-term things that we'll see as we deal with the pandemic over the next couple of months.
All of you watching from New York, heed those words. Correct.
I love New York, by the way.
Dominic, let's give you the last word on this.
Listen, I can't say it any better than John and Jonathan just said it right now. I think similar to their companies, accounting consulting firms, we've been prepared for remote working. And in many cases, we've been, pushing our clients to do more web-based meetings, to do more secure file transport, just being in that digital age. And, where we've been forcing it almost in the past and pushing it, it's now almost mandatory to keep doing business. And so I would just say, just feel comfortable with digital, feel comfortable with innovation, feel comfortable, coming up with ideas, and your leaders should not be a no. It should always be a let's talk about it, let's think through, and let's find out what the best approach is for both us and the company, our people, and our customers.
Well said. Jonathan, I don't know if you got the memo, but month 3 of quarantine, it's no longer cool to have your beard. You're supposed to shave it. Jonathan Hartzell from Wells Fargo, John Stoutinger from Ally, and Dominic Henriquez from RSM. I can't thank you gentlemen enough for joining as our esteemed panel. With that being said, you guys can get lost now, and we will move on
Thanks, Doug.
to
Thanks,
what